Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to the fifth in our second series of book discussions on recent works on the history and culture of Jews in the Polish lands, organized under the auspices of the Global Educational Outreach Program of the POLIN Museum of the History of Polish Jews in Warsaw. Tonight's discussion is an evaluation of the work of the Polish Jewish painter Samuel Hirszenberg, who lived from 1865 to 1908, based on the fine recent monograph by Mirjam Rajner and Richard Cohen, Samuel Hirszenberg, 1865 to 1908, a Polish Jewish artist in turmoil, which is a product, which was published by the Littman Library of Jewish Civilization, also the publishers of POLIN Studies in Polish Jewry. This is a comprehensive account of the life of a major Polish Jewish painter. In his work, Hershenberg first followed the earlier Polish Jewish artist Mauricy Gottlieb in depicting Jewish dissenters such as Uriel da Costa. He then turned to genre scenes that portrayed the lives of contemporary Jews, and subsequently, from the turn of the century, inspired by the idea of the Jewish national revival, a series of works showing the displacement of East European Jews, which became Zionist icons. He was also responsible for the decoration of the large dining room and ballroom in the palace built for the wood textile magnate Israel Poznański. In 1907, he settled in Jerusalem, assuming a teaching position at the Bezalel Academy of Arts and Design. He died shortly after, barely a year later, but before he did so, he produced a series of paintings depicting Jerusalem's Jews and impressionistic landscapes. In the discussion, I think we'll look at his complex struggle to become a painter, and his artistic goals will be fully discussed. This is a remarkable monograph which I most strongly recommend. We have the two authors here this evening, and we have two people here to discuss the work, François Guesnet and Renata Piątkowska. I'll briefly introduce them, and then I'll ask the two authors to describe what they were trying to do. Mirjam Rajner is Associate Professor and Chair of the Department of Jewish Art at Bar-Ilan University. Since 2005, she's been co-editor of Ars Judaica, the leading journal on Jewish art and visual culture. She's published numerous articles on Marc Chagall and modern Central and East European Jewish art in exhibition catalogues, edited volumes, and academic volumes, journals such as East European Jewish Studies, Images, Jewish Art, Nashim, and many others. And she's currently co-editing a collection of articles entitled Crossing Borders, A Jewish History and Culture in Southeastern Europe. Richard Cohen is Emeritus Professor in the Department of Jewish History and Contemporary Jewry at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He's curated two major exhibitions, one in New York, From Court Jews to the Rothschilds, and one in Paris, Les Juifs errants, Un témoin de temps. He's the author of J, which was the recipient of the Arnold Wischnitzer Prize for the Best Book in Jewish History in 1999, and has edited and co-edited over 15 books, many focused on aspects of Jewish art and history. Two of his co-edited works are published also by the Littman Library: The Jewish Contribution to Civilization, Reassessing an Idea, and Insiders and Outsiders, Dilemmas of East European Jewry. The two discussants are Renata Piątkowska and François Guesnet. Renata Piątkowska is the Chief Collections Curator at POLIN Museum. She graduated from the Institute of Art History at the University of Warsaw. She's the author of many books, articles, and exhibitions on the art and culture of Polish Jews, including Między Ziemiańska a Montparnassem, Roman Krummstück, Between the Ziemiańska Cafe and Montparnasse, Roman Krummstück. Before joining the POLIN Museum in 2006, she curated several exhibitions, among them Friends, Samuel Hirszenberg, Jan Chrzanowski, Władysław Zawodowski. François Guesnet is Professor of Modern Jewish History at University College London. He specializes in the early modern and 19th century Jewish history of Polish and East European Jews, and is co-chair of the editorial board of POLIN Studies in Polish Jewry. Among his publications are Polnische Juden im 19. Jahrhundert, Lebensbedingungen, Rechtsnormen und Organisation im Wandel, 1998, which we all hope will soon appear in English, and as editor, Warsaw, the Jewish Metropolis, which was presented to me on the occasion of my 70th birthday. With other editor was Glenn Diner. He's also the co-editor of Negotiating Religion, Cross-Disciplinary Perspectives with Cecile Laborde and Lois Lee. So we have a very good team here, and I'll ask the two authors, in the first case, Mirjam Rajner, to describe what they were doing in this important volume, and then we'll go on to look at the volume and to ask some of the questions which it raises. Mirjam.
Actually, Richie will first start.
I'm
sorry.
going to begin. I want to thank the Professor Polonsky for inviting us to do this and have this evening and trying to open up issues in the life of Hershenberg. One of the things that we were both thinking about is how do you write an encompassing monograph of an artist? It's very different from writing a monograph on a historical figure who was known for his or her political activity, literary, scholarly activity, a visionary in a particular area. When it comes to Hershenberg, we are left basically with very few very little textual material that came from his life. There are very few letters, very few speeches, very few personal comments on his artistic world. And one is left first and foremost with his works of art. And we were fortunate enough to have the opportunity coming to the Museum of Tel Aviv and finding a sketchbook which Hershenberg had worked on from 1883. And this sketchbook is extremely important in trying to understand what was going on in the life of this artist. And I would say that even looking at this one page from the sketchbook, you can see aspects of what Hershenberg was playing with. He was very much concerned with his teacher, Jan Matejko. We'll talk about him in a moment. We can see that he writes down the schedule that he was studying at that point in 1883. We can see Arabic words which don't have any meaning, but it's clear that the sketchbook opens something which we did not have, which was never published before, and we were very fortunate to be able to use this in our work. And fortunately, there is a wonderful, controversial, in some ways, personal memoir that his wife, Dina, wrote in 1909, a year after he passed away. Now, Dina is a very interesting figure in the world of Hershenberg. He marries her in 1897 in Munich. She is a convert. She's from France. She comes from a Catholic family. We don't know if she converted because she met Hershenberg or she had converted before. And she remains with him until his death in 1908, writes a very interesting memoir in 1909. And so we have that source, which offers us a very unique perspective on Hershenberg's work. We do know about exhibitions that Hershenberg planned and that he was part of. And we also have some contemporary discussions of his work and people who met him. This is what we have, and Mirjam will continue to tell you something about the way in which we went about searching for Hershenberg.
Okay. I just want to make sure everybody sees Dina, right?
Yes.
Fine. So let me continue from here. To make things more complicated, Hirschenberg was known for decades to scholars of Jewish art. So it's not that we discovered some new unknown artist. However, only due to his seminal and dramatic works relating to Jewish existence in Eastern Europe at the turn of the century, showcasing time and again the hardship of life in diaspora, galut, imbued in poverty, seclusion, and anti-Semitism, which was reproduced in various volumes on Jewish art. in contrast to his predecessor, Maurycy Gottlieb, whose oeuvre was hailed in his lifetime and is to this day considered an integral element of both Polish painting and Jewish art in the 19th century. Hirschenberg was often relegated by the Jewish scholars to being a painter of the Jewish ghetto, who predominantly gave expression in his canvases to the unfortunate side of Jewish life. Although a street in Jerusalem, in the vicinity of the Bezalel School of Art, was named after him, he was consigned to the long 19th century of old academic art, shunned by modernism and the emerging new Israeli art. We set out to challenge this tradition and rediscover the diversity of Samuel's life's work. Thus, the most important challenge to create such a monograph about him was to uncover first and foremost his oeuvre. Before asking questions and looking for possible answers to understand the nature of this artist, it was first necessary to see the works in situ, to create a clear log on his wanderings from Łódź to centers of artistic traditions, Krakow, Munich, Paris, back to Łódź and Krakow, to Jerusalem, and to places that he enjoyed visiting, especially Italy. And now I will show you some of our own wanderings in footsteps of Hirschenberg that we did in course of the years while we were researching and preparing the book. So first visit was, of course, to Łódź, his birth town, and enchanted palace that we rediscovered there, or discovered for first time for us. Then Krakow, where he studied, where he visited several times in the course of preparing the book. One of the photographs taken at the graveyards, at the Krakow, the old one and the new one, which eventually influenced his famous painting that maybe we'll discuss later, that is nowadays at the Museum of Jewish Museum of History in Paris. Or the most unusual trip that we undertook to Dean Hill Park in England, where this famous painting, very, very large, of Sabbath Rest, that we will maybe also discuss a little bit later, is stored in storages that were used during the World War II for munition, and still have this atmosphere of secrecy. And we ventured even there. The painting belongs to Ben Uri Gallery in London, but it's stored in this remote place. We visited Rapperswil in Switzerland, where is the Museum of Polish Emigres. And there is this painting, beautiful painting of Teresa Silberstein, one of the patrons of Hirschenberg, that also owned in Poland a summer house in Lisowice, together with her husband. Marcus invited Hirschenberg many times to visit, and he painted some of his works also there. And then finally, Italy, that he enjoyed visiting, but we unfortunately didn't in this research, but there are the paintings of him painted in different locations, from Capri to Ancoli, from Anticoli to Villa in the Rome, and so on. So I think Richie will continue here talking about the family and the early life of Hirschenberg.
Now, as Professor Polonsky mentioned, he was born in 1865. He comes from a traditional Jewish family in Łódź, the first of 11 children. And it's clear to us that from the outset of his life, not from birth, but early on, there's a clear rupture between his upbringing and his desire to become an artist. Łódź, in the world of textile, encouraged thousands of Germans and Jews to enter the city and develop the trade that became synonymous with the city. His father was one of those who tried to make it in the city and wanted his son to follow him. But his life was not a very successful one. And it's clear that this did not in any way move Hershenberg and encourage him to follow in his father's footsteps. What brought Hershenberg to want a different path is not clear. The only thing that we can say very clearly is that he evolved in particular direction, and his work continued to be, his oeuvre continued to which is transmitted in the book, a variety of themes which he is engaged with, recur again and again, and at times with different styles and different textures. There's an interest in impressionism, in symbolism, nature, portrait painting, and of course, his interest in Jewish themes. Now, when you just take a look at this figure, you have, let's go back to figure 20 for a moment, Mirjam. You have 4 different works which deal with the Jewish themes. You have his famous Wandering Jew from 1899. You have a work which he begins working on in 1899, but doesn't finish in 1904, The Exile. He has this very powerful work at the bottom in 1897 called The Last Jew, which is shown in Ein Harod. And when you look at this picture, you should also see not only the man looking at this candle, which is gradually coming to its end, but the figure in the background. Who is that figure? It's the same year that he marries Dina. And then, of course, you have this other very important painting, which Mirjam mentioned before, of the Sabbath rest. But there is another aspect to his Jewish perspective. If we look at the next image, we see something which clearly engaged Hershenberg, and not only Hershenberg, for many years. In 1888, he does a painting which we have been unable to find. Probably it's lost, where you see Spinoza, very, very driven, wearing a kippah, wearing a skull cap, and the child who is sitting on him, excuse me, the child, it's Uriel Acosta who's sitting with this skull cap, and the blonde is Spinoza. It's almost as if Hershenberg is creating a genealogy. And yet here we are, 1907, 20 years after he does this work of Acosta and Spinoza, we have the excommunication of Spinoza, and you can see this rabbinical figure or Orthodox man who is about to pick up a stone and throw it at Spinoza. So these issues continue to reverberate in his life, and therefore the book deals with these issues. And then, of course, we come to his visit or his attempt to settle, not necessarily for good. It's a question which we're not convinced that we can say that he came to Bezalel to remain in Bezalel. He's sitting here next to Boris Schatz with students in front of the Bezalel Museum in 1907. And of course, in Bezalel, they gave tremendous importance to his Wandering Jew. And you can see here various postcards which were created where you see Schatz standing in different positions with various figures, Chada'am, Weizmann, and others. And in the background, you have Samuel Hirszenberg's The Wandering Jew. So in a sense, what we were trying to show here was the staying power of Hershenberg even after his death. You can see this in the way Rappaport does the Warsaw Ghetto Monument, which is basically an attempt to reconstruct the way Hershenberg portrayed the exiles. And then a modern artist in Israel, Eyal Adler Kellner, brings together Herzl standing over a French officer, and in the background you have the Eternal Jew of Hershenberg. So the book ends with an attempt to understand the impact of Hershenberg's work on other artistic works. So that's a brief summary from our perspective.
Well, thank you very much, Mirjam and Richard. I think that this gives everybody a very clear idea of what's in the book, and the visual images, which you can also find in the book and also obviously in various museums, are very striking. Before we proceed to the discussion, I'd like to make one correction. The book for which Richard Cohen won was the recipient of the Arnold Vishnitzer Prize for the best book in Jewish history, was of course Jewish Icons, Art and Society in Modern Europe. I hadn't written this out fully in my introduction. I should also say that I very much hope that the audience this evening, and I hope it's a large audience, we can't really see you, will pose questions yourselves. These can be done on the chat facility, and they'll be forwarded to me, and I'll be able to put them to the audience. The way in which I thought we should conduct this discussion is to put a number of questions to the two discussants, and then after they respond to them, to ask Richard and Mirjam to make their responses. Some of these questions have at least in part been already answered in the initial presentations, but I don't think that doesn't mean we can't look at them again. And so the first question, which I think that I'd like Renata and François to address, is how did Samuel Hirszenberg become a painter? Why did he become a painter? How was he affected by his period of study at the Krakow School of Fine Arts between 1881 and 83, and his contact there with the great 19th century Polish realistic historical painter Jan Matejko? There's a lot one could say about Matejko. The late Ezra Mendelssohn has written about the different and complex aspects of his own attitude to Jews, but I'll stop there and ask Renata first to respond to this question.
We don't know exactly, as Richard said, but it is a very interesting family, Hirschenberg family, because this is not only Samuel who became a painter, but he was also an example for his siblings to undertake artistic education. So I think that it was something really interesting inside the family, with open-minded father and mother which allow their children to follow their artistic path. But also it was also good, kind of good atmosphere for not only Jewish painter, mainly men, but also for people from very poor peasant families to become artists, because the Hirschenberg and others were supported by for example, by the Jewish community. But others like Abraham Neumann or Józef Gabowicz were supported by the noblemen from the city and from the places they used to live. So it was something in the atmosphere that the way to artistic education was open. And I'm really convinced that also inside the Jewish society, this way was open to different people. Of course, it was, Jewish community in Warsaw was really not conservative, not traditional one, but, scholarship for a boy who wanted to go to the Krakow Academy of Art, it was done, given every year. And there were, the list is quite big. Samuel Hirszenberg was really convinced that he wants to be an artist, and people around him, including family and other people and his patron as well, support him and give him a chance to study and to continue his artistic career.
Yes, thank you. Of course, both his brothers were also painters, I think. François, do you want to?
Yes, with pleasure. So first of all, huge congratulations to Richie and Mirjam. This book is an amazing accomplishment. It is a real inspiration for anyone who browses it. It's extremely well, not only extremely well researched, it's also extremely well produced. So also congratulations to the Littman Library of Jewish Civilization. It's an exceptionally beautiful book, which really allows you to delve into the fin de siècle visual culture in Central and Western Europe and beyond. So that's an amazing achievement. So again, congratulations. I think I would like to start with Lodz. Lodz, I have a soft spot for Lodz. I love Lodz. And if we say that somebody was born to a traditional Jewish family in Lodz, this is also obviously always a half truth, because nobody was traditional who was born in Lodz in 1865. It was a city in an extremely dynamic development, demographic. It was a metropolitan city, in contrast to Krakow, sleepy Krakow, and irredentist Warsaw. Lodz was a city where people would work, would cohabitate in order to make ends meet if you were poor, or to cut a good profit if you were rich and powerful. And so I think this must have had a huge impact on the young Hirschenberg, because he, from the very start on, and I mean, the sketchbook is such an incredible finding. It's amazing. The first page, which you shared with us, is a good example, but there are many, many other pages reproduced in this fine volume where you see that he was like a sponge. He would integrate everything. So he is a cosmopolitan in the first place. Then he is also a very talented visual artist. He has exceptional talent from the very beginning. And this talent only evolves and expresses itself in the most diverse ways, which is, and I should say, for good or for bad, because I mean, I don't want to, but perhaps we can discuss that, because some of the art which he creates is, I mean, very conservative, because he's doing it for his patrons, and these are boring portraits. I mean, like the Silberstein Nova portraits. This is very conservative. But on the same time, when he was in Paris, he would, as I said, like a sponge, he would understand the new visual universe which opened through Impressionism. So we have a painting of a woman with a red umbrella, which is Manet and Monet in the same time, and he's not reproducing; he's original. But he's also is as original in his perception of the symbolism of his time. Malchevsky, Mayhofer, Podkowinsky. He's amazing in engaging, not following, in engaging with the various options of the visual culture of his time. So this is a real Lodgermensch, because the Lodgermenschen are able to do that. They are free people. That's my little spiel here for Lodz. So Lodz certainly had a huge impact on him, and so the openness, the visual cultural openness, is really one which comes, I believe, from this metropolitan industrial city where he grew up.
Well, thank you. I'd like to ask Mirjam and Richard to respond. Mirjam first.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to respond. I agree with you definitely, François, what you said about Lodz, but there is also something that is missing, I think, here, that at that stage when he was developing, before he was actually a teenager, very young man before he left for Krakow, there wasn't still so much happening on the artistic scene in Łódź. It happened later, a little bit later. And actually, he was the one who initiated when he came back to Łódź in the 90s, in the early 90s, and then settled for 12 years. He lived there. He was the one who brought Podkowinski, and he was one who organized exhibitions in order to encourage the visual and the artistic life. So in a way, he was really pre his time. He was, developed very early, was very talented. And I think that one of the important influences was the success of Gottlieb, of the Maurycy Gottlieb, who had exhibitions in Warsaw that we don't know still. We never were able to really prove whether he went before he went to Krakow, whether he visited Warsaw, and he saw actually Gottlieb exhibited there in a Ungar salon. And Gottlieb was already very, very well known, published, and his paintings were already well known. So in a way, he gave an example of an artist, of a Jewish artist who can succeed. And we thought that this was also the reason why he went to Krakow, not only because of Matejko, but because Gottlieb studied there. He could have also gone to Warsaw. Why he didn't go to Warsaw? Right?
Because there is not the School of Fine Art in Warsaw. It was shut by Russian.
Oh, at the time.
Yeah,
at the
so
time
it was the reason.
In the 60s, okay.
Yeah.
But there
he could go to St. Petersburg, but
okay. Were there not some
want.
courses in Warsaw at that same time? With where people were able not to school, but there were some courses.
Yes, school.
So, for instance,
schools,
Pilichowski did go to Warsaw, right? He didn't study it.
Yes, but it was not, it was
time.
not academy. This is a private school by Wojciech Gerson.
Right.
Important, but not the same.
Yeah.
Richard, do you want to say something?
I was just very interested in that François is describing a lodge which we did not feel the same way about the city. In other words, we did not think that Lodz in the late 19th century was a cosmopolitan city. It had Germans, it had Jews who were involved in factories and so on and so forth. But we felt, as Mirjam just said before, that there was a lack of culture in the city. And we have found various Polish writers who were very, very critical of the city of Lodz. So I'm interested in your very positive approach to the city.
Well, I mean, it's złe miasto, right? So it was the bad town, the bad city. That's obvious. People were poor, people were miserable. It was an ugly city, ugly place to be, but it was cosmopolitan in the sense that there was no what one could call in sociology hegemonic culture. There were various cultures existing side by side, so it was not a cosmopolitan in the sense of hipster artists today who know what is going on in New York galleries and what is going on in Paris galleries and Tokyo galleries. He was just confronted with an urban life which was less defined and still multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious, where people had to negotiate their cohabitation every day in a new way. And this is his cosmopolitan. This is his cosmopolitanism. It's not an artistic cosmopolitanism yet. It will become one. That would be my argument. And this is this kind of freedom which a place like Lodz had, unseemly as it was.
We'll come on to look at the Poznański Palace, which is interesting in this context, but perhaps let's hold off on that. Mirjam.
I just wanted to add to what you were saying, that Hirschenberg went to the arts industrial school before he left Łódź. He studied in the industrial school, crafts and industry, like being ready. His father hoped that he will join him. But this was actually the place where he could have met all these different people, because there were children of Polish and German and Jewish, and they studied in Russian, but also German. And he was exposed there to this multicultural culturalism in Łódź that first at his school, if not before.
Well, let me move on to the next question. But before I do so, again, I'd appeal to our audience to pose any questions that you have for the group on the chat facility. This question, the second question, has been partially answered by François. But what did Hirschenberg learn from his study at the Munich Academy between 1883 and 1887, and at the Académie Colarossi in Paris between 1889 and 1892? He had a long artistic apprenticeship, and he was clearly at places where which were in the forefront of artistic developments, as François already mentioned. I'll ask Renata first to comment on this.
Oh, in fact, what Hirschenberg learned from Munich, I learned from the book by Mirjam and Richard. It was really, for me, opening absolutely a new way of seeing Hirschenberg. Of course, he followed a quite usual step by Polish artists, because they study at Krakow and then they went to Munich. He followed the path also of Maurycy Gottlieb, who did the same, some years ago. But I think that, and for both, for Gottlieb and for Hirschenberg, the years in Munich were crucial for their art, in terms of art, of paintings, but also in terms of identity, thinking about himself as an artist, as a man, as a Jew, as a, Paul, I never called, but European man, for example. So it was really, for me, a great pleasure to read it and to learn so much about Hirschenberg in Munich.
Shall I continue?
You want to say something about Paris, or shall I leave that to François?
I don't know whether I have to add something about Paris, except that the food is good. Munich is a fascinating stage, because there he actually engages with let's say programmatic subjects and Jewishness in a way which probably would have been difficult to do in Krakow or in another city in Eastern Europe. And I'm thinking, but before I go there, I would like to mention one thing, which is also part of the quality of the book, because it really looks at the life of a painter, of an artist, that he starved terribly during his years in Munich, and he probably damaged his health to a degree by starvation, because he was not funded by anyone. I mean, very little money from home, etc. So he would collect breadcrumbs in the academy to survive, which really would put his life at risk in the long term and probably cost him his life. So that's a dimension of artistic life which we should not forget here, and which is also another indication to which degree he was a dedicated artist. He never stopped producing. He never considered leaving this activity. So this is a very impressive aspect of his life as well. But Munich is the place which allows him to paint a stunning oeuvre, which is Yeshiva. I mean, I don't know, we could call it up.
You wanted to look at some of the images?
It had been, this is a painting which was much criticized in the years to come, because it would show something which later pictures of himself do not do, or some do and some not. There is an incredible tension in this picture. It is not Gottlieb, obviously. I mean, the picture, the painting of Gottlieb in the synagogue, which is, I mean, pardon my French, very kitschy.
Yes.
Here we have a description of a state of flow, a floating ambience between people who are deeply immersed in study, people who are tired, people who are bored, people who are just there. And this is the yeshiva. This is, if you want, the core of Jewish life, of traditional Jewish life at the time. So what we have here is a very serious engaging with what a yeshiva is, but it is also a magisterial, artistic way to engage with the tensions, with the contradictions, with the challenges of this life, and also with the failings. And this is something we will see in later paintings time and again. So he becomes a poster boy of the early Zionist movement, but this is obviously a very partial reception of what he did, because many of his paintings, like the Temple, like the Debate, like the later Tashlich, which is revolutionary, like the one we saw about the Cherem against Spinoza, show a really incredible ability to reflect a tension in a Jewish existence. And this is something which he could do because he was in Munich. And interestingly enough, as the authors of this extremely fine volume point out, he didn't really engage with Munich. He was in Munich, but there's this one vignette about the dead Ludwig II, but there's nothing more of it Bavarian, although Bavaria is very pretty, and you could do as nice ambience paintings as of, I don't know, Capri or Jerusalem. You could do of the Alps. He's not interested, but he matures in his years in Munich, and as a painter and as a human being. So I think this painting of 1887 is really showing the ability of Hirschenberg to condense a very, very complex historical and cultural situation in one painting, and this is why he's a true master.
Mirjam, do you want to comment?
Maybe Richie can.
Mirjam, can you make the picture bigger?
You want again, Yeshiva? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Enlarge it, please.
Yeah, let's see.
Full screen.
Yeah. So people can see it better. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Do you want to comment, Richie? You want to start with it?
Well, I would say what François is saying is very, very important. We struggled, and we were very fortunate to have the assistance of the curator in Krakow to try to figure out what was written on the back in Hebrew.
Yeah.
And it's not clear. It may have been something like, who enters Misha Nichnas Adar Marbim Besimcha, but it's not clear that this is what he was saying, that when you come to the month of Purim, one enters with happiness. But when you look at the picture, it's clear that that's not what he's thinking. And what you can't see at the moment is the teacher who is sitting in front of the large text is holding a book below, probably a book which was not part of the yeshiva world. In that sense, it's clear at the same time that he's doing Uriel da Costa and Spinoza, he's doing this book, he's doing this painting. In other words, his rupture with the traditional world is very clear. And it's striking to hear what you're saying, François, that in Munich he was able to do this. And it's clear that his mind was much more important. His self, his internal being was much more important at that point than going outside and trying to see very pretty pictures of the city.
Yes, but if I may, what is also important is the dedication to reflect this reality. It's a really masterfully composed painting, so there is a deep engagement here. It is not a simple how should I say, he's not accusing the traditional world, a Jewish world, of being this or that. It reflects the real life tensions which existed in this world, and he's able to show them in this way, which is, I think, is without. I mean, I'm not aware of any other painting which would engage in this way with the world of traditional Talmud study. At the time, there are certainly examples from later stages, but in this way, he's a pioneer as well. Antony asked us to think about the following stage in Paris as well. I mean, his mastery of visual expression is, as I already mentioned, is coming to the fore in his works in Paris, which will leave a long and very clear trace in his creation. So even when he paints this rather embarrassing portraits of his patrons, which he had all. I mean, we will speak about the palace in Poznański's palace in Lodz, and I'm a big fan of Poznański. Don't get me wrong, but this is all on the very predictable and cheap side of artistic creation. All this time he continued to paint in a way which was inspired by his time in Paris. While we have in the Lodz period this other painting of a lady with a red umbrella, which is an embarrassment. I mean, which is really
so critical.
very, very, very conservative. I mean, this is painting for money. Which is fully understandable. I have no criticism at all to make here. He continued when he goes to the countryside. He paints the most beautiful studies of nature and towns. He maintains this ability to express himself in an impressionist way, which is again really masterful. So he really matures into an accomplished artist in this period.
Well, thank you. I mean,
okay,
sorry,
maybe
Mirjam.
we should stop here. I just wanted to show something from his Paris period, so to really stress this difference. But even before we go to this little Paris impressionistic really painting with the lady with red umbrella, I just wanted to say, still back to Munich, here also this notebook, sketchbook was extremely important because we found there this list of Jewish books, history books that he was reading and studying very carefully and thinking about different topics dealing with Jewish history that he didn't paint at the end. And he painted yeshiva. But I think this was a certain preparation in order to come to a conclusion that yeshiva then became. And not just that, but also yeshiva, let me share again just for a moment, in a way connects Munich with Paris, with this window, because this is like inside an inner Jewish world, but the outside world that really didn't penetrate yet into his art is sort of appearing here behind this colorful curtain. And the curtain has the only part of this painting that has something a little bit colorful, in contrast to the other very dark and gray paintings here, sort of red stripes, which to me, they were always very, why he put red stripes on this curtain? But I always thought that there is some kind of connection between red stripes and the light and the life behind the window, which he wants to let penetrate also his paintings. And then eventually that really happens in Paris. And maybe I'll just briefly show this this beautiful little painting, which is otherwise really, this was with, excuse me, I have to remember where I put it. I think, yeah, here it's in Paris also. This is actually a very small painting. It's not something large. I'm sorry. It's not clear whether it was really meant to be a larger painting, or I just cannot do it. I'm sorry. Let's
We
leave
saw
it.
it.
Yeah,
we've
let's
seen it,
leave
yeah.
it like this. I cannot enlarge it.
No, leave it, it's
Because
fine.
the size is very small. So the question is whether this was really just a sketch, and because if it's possibly a sketch, that he let himself go and be more free than he would be usually in a final version. But the truth is, yes, that the free brushstrokes and the colors, that's definitely influence of Paris.
If you,
Mirjam,
Mirjam, if you go down 2 slides, we have the other lady with the
That's
red,
right.
red
Yeah,
umbrella.
that's
Just
right.
as a comparison.
That's right.
yes,
That's the Lisa, it's a lady.
yes.
And
That's, I mean, yeah, that's a postcard. I mean, yeah. We need
Yes,
a picture
but-
of Aunt Rochel, and then
Okay,
it
but
should be
it's
pretty.
not
It should look pretty.
it's not
And,
only
and we
money.
paid so much money for the park. The park should also look pretty.
But it's not only money. He paints here
No,
for
I'm
an audience that's more conservative, that it's not able to grasp the Paris inventions. So I think that he has to adapt himself also to his surroundings back in Lodz. It's not just that he wants to sell the work.
Well, let's move on. I mean, this is a fascinating discussion, but we don't have a lot of time. When I prepared the questions, I did ask what were Hershenberg's main themes. I think that we've already articulated what they were. Let me just mention some of them, and I'd like Renata and François to comment on what they think are most important. Clearly, he started following Marici Gottlieb in depicting Jewish dissenters. Uriel da Costa is a good example. He then turned to genre scenes portraying the lives of contemporary Jews. The yeshiva could be seen as that, or could also be seen as social criticism. And then from the turn of the century, he began to write, to depict the displacement of East European Jews, the wandering Jew. And finally, when he got to Jerusalem, he tried to depict the Jews of Jerusalem, and also, as in the Paris pictures, the Jerusalem landscape. Renata, I mean, the real issue is how fine a painter is he? Out of these different themes, what are the ones, or what are the pictures which strike you as most important, which have most to speak to us?
You know, it depends. For me, the yeshiva is the first I saw, and this is the best. But also, I think that the Spinoza paintings, especially the excommunication of Spinoza, it was quite important paintings, although often reproduced in press. And for me, I think that there are what I follow, Mirjam and Richard. Of course, this is something that say about him as a contemporary man who think about the Jewish past and Jewish contemporary life of the society and of himself. But of course, for people, at the time he was alive, he was in Krakow, and later on, it was The Exile as the most important work by Hirschenberg.
François, do you want to add?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I have a top 10. There are so many fascinating pictures. I would like to continue the trajectory which leads from the yeshiva to other paintings, which engage with the broad theme of Jewishness or Jewish tradition and being a Jew, where actually he continues this kind of careful, or an attempt of careful calibration of the challenges of being Jewish. I think of, first of all, obviously of yeshiva, but also think of The Last Jew, which is exactly the same, and Richie already spoke about that, about this lost gaze, and he doesn't look at the text anymore. He looks at the faint, I mean, small, weak candle. So it is a bit like an image of Kafka, right? So an attempt to connect with something which is meaningful and rich and has marked his life, but which is also endangered. And the danger is obviously the wandering Jew, the exile. That's I mean, the threats to the Jewish existence are very, very forcefully expressed, but the ambivalences are equally carefully expressed. So I think, for example, of the painting Tashlich, which is, I don't know whether Richie or Mirjam could show this. Tashlich, which is a quote, which is a very interesting quote of one of the leading Polish artists of the time, Gierymski, who has a famous painting, Tashlich, which is a custom where you go to a flowing water and drop something in it and leave your sins with it. So Tashlich of Gierymski is a very idyllic depiction, and Tashlich of Hirschenberg, look at this painting. I mean, they are obviously lost. The one is already standing at the side. I mean, they gaze into the, I mean, they don't have the clear orientation which somebody who would fulfill a ritual with a full heart and in full consciousness of the meaningfulness. Here we have three people who are actually not sure what they are doing there. And again, this is not this is the artistry of Hirschenberg, that this is not an accusation. This is not a cheap look at these silly traditional Jews. No, this is the painter who reflects his own ambivalence, his own questions, the challenges he faces himself. Where is he? Where is his place, for example, in society? This is further expressed in a number of teachings where you have a prominent figure in the forefront. This is Moses, but also these people in the forefront of the exile and of which is the Black Banner, where you have people who express fear or doubt or tension, and you have large masses of people in the background, large masses of Jews in the background, faceless, unstructured, and this also is true of the painting Cherem, and also true of the painting The Auction, which is a remarkable painting because it shows.
Let me show just some of those that you mentioned.
Yes, so you have very large masses of people and a few in the foreground who are this is actually not one of them because there you have a very clear-cut situation. Here and in exile, you have this state of tension or a challenge which is expressed so forcefully in his painting, and obviously Brit Milah. There is a painting which is called Brit Milah, which shows a circumcision ceremony, where the community is actually I have to say, a slightly threatening entity in the background. So these are paintings which, starting with the yeshiva, going through the whole oeuvre of Hirschenberg, showing somebody who is struggling, not accusing, not making an easy case, but somebody who is struggling and in a much more complex way than the Wandering Jew, for example. The Wandering Jew is, that's a poster, and it was used as a poster, and it probably was meant as a poster, I don't know. But all these other paintings which I have mentioned show something else, a serious, ongoing engagement with the complex challenges to being a Jew around 1900. And obviously, exile Exile is painted in 99, finished in 1904. 99, this is 2 years after Dreyfus. I mean, this is, I mean, the horizon is crumbling at this moment, and we really sense that, and he's reflecting that. But this is not a political commentary, or it's not everything. This is not the whole thing. What is also true that this is a spiritual and also emotional horizon which is crumbling for him. A small addendum to what Antony explained about the Jerusalem paintings. He also painted Arabs, and he painted Geminite Jews who were as exotic as the Arabs he painted. For me, his Jerusalem paintings are I mean a bit like paintings of a German painter in Italy. I mean, this is tradition. I mean, this is really Orientalist vocabulary, exotizing the object, and this also holds true. And I mean, Mirjam and Richie comment on that in their beautiful book that actually the vistas of Jerusalem are empty. It's just scenery. Which is a bit, yeah, look at this. I mean, there's nobody around, right? So he has just arrived. Yeah, we have to say that, and he's ill, and so but it is a painting which doesn't show life. It's a postcard.
Well, thank you. Let's move on. The question of patronage has been mentioned on a couple of occasions and how it worked out in practice. And this is discussed in the book, and I wonder whether Renata and François can comment on how was it that Hershenberg came to decorate at least parts of the Poznański palace in Łódź, and how much of this work survives? That's perhaps a question for Mirjam and Richard. But Renata, do you want to say something about the peculiar Poznański palace?
Yes, it was, Silberstein from the very beginning were the patrons of Hirschenberg. And not only Hirschenberg, but also other artists, musicians, theater people, and painters. So I think that after the marriage of Teresa Silberstein and Maurycy Poznański, it was their decision to give this job for Hirschenberg. But in fact, Hirschenberg was the most famous and the most important artist at the time in Łódź. There were no other artists the same artistic quality that can do that. Of course, they could hire someone from Germany or even from Paris. Or from Warsaw, they did it before, and the other people did that. But they decided to support Jewish artists and support Hirschenberg in this commission, and give him this commission. I agree. In fact, I don't like very much these paintings because they are really made on commission and to make his patron really how to say happy with this beautiful paintings, and but they are still very interesting in terms of messages inside, but also from the artistic point of view. They are really interesting and good. They are not. They try to give some new things. Of course, we have to remember that Impressionism was already, something passé, even in Poland. but its symbolism started to develop, and not only in Paris and in Germany, but also in Poland, in Krakow especially, but also in Warsaw. It became a really important part of artistic life and of art, especially of painting.
François, do you want to add anything?
No, I love the palace. I've been many times, and I love the pictures, the paintings, but I will leave it at that, perhaps.
Yes, quite. Well, maybe we should move on from this to the question of the second move, Hirschenberg's second return to Krakow. He left Łódź and he went to Krakow in 1904. Why did he do this, and what was its significance? Again, this is something obviously which is in the book.
Because Krakow at the moment was the most important artistic center in Poland. Yeah. Absolutely. There were no doubt that he wanted to be the really vibrant place with many people coming to Krakow, not only painters, artists, sculptors, but also men of theater, literary men, and so it's obvious. In which it was really difficult to develop his artistic ideas. Artists needs not only patrons, but also needs other people to inspire them. And I think that at the beginning of the 20th century, Krakow was the only place in Poland that he can find it.
François, do you want to add?
Well, there was a remarkable exhibition in London 2 years ago about Młoda Polska, young Poland, which was a good illustration for this context which Renata just described, an yes. Extremely dynamic and rich artistic environment full of inspiration, and many of the paintings which I mentioned before, like Tashlich, like Cherem, like Brit Milá, these are all also the Jewish themes are from this period, which I mean, if we go back to my observation that he painted, he needed to be in Munich to paint the yeshiva painting. He is able to paint these Brit Milá, Cherem, and the other paintings while in Krakow, while in a context of Eastern European Jewish life. So Krakow was also certainly a cultural metropolis. I mean, to a certain degree at the time, and certainly the most open and dynamic Polish city of the period. So that's
Renata. The time is running out, but there's a lot of things I'd still like to discuss. You've written extensively on the reaction of Jewish painters to pogroms, particularly the pogrom wave of 1904-7. Where does Hirschenberg fit into that?
Oh, he was a real inspiration for them. Absolutely, they saw his paintings. And for them, like for Markowicz, between Hirschenberg and Markowicz, in my opinion, this is an ongoing conversation, not from Hirschenberg part, but from Markowicz, definitely. It was the same with Minkowski, with Weinlet, with the Polish artists. They saw mainly the exile, and it was kind of starting point for their ideas of describe this events.
Yes, I think that's clear. Now, as I say, time is running out. This conversation could go on forever, and I'm very grateful, particularly to both Mirjam and Richard, because we saw so many of these images. Because it's very easy to talk about paintings, but it's much better to look at them. The last question is, why did Hirschenberg move to Palestine? And he didn't last very long there, but what did he achieve there? What was his significance in Bezalel? François, do you want to answer this first?
I think, I mean, for him, I think this was an opportunity to contrast all what he has expressed in earlier works and what he dealt with, what he engaged with a context which was obviously one which will have been a part of his landscape, of his mental map, so to speak, as a Jew and as a Polish Jew, and so there was certainly an expectation of a new beginning or a new opportunity, and
which was of course tragically cut short.
Very short.
He was very young.
So I think the beginnings show his mastery, and if he would have lived longer, he would probably develop a more nuanced reflection of the Near Eastern or Palestinian realities of his time. But he was tragically cut short in this.
Renata, do you want to add anything?
You know, I know. I think that definitely it was a new beginning, a new opportunity for him. He thought about that with really excitement to find a new place for him. It's such an interview, short interview in Polish press. And he developed very largely then that this is a new place for art, because he knew that it was not a very important artistic center, Palestine at the time, but he said that this new school in this new country can develop something very important for Jews, but also for the place, for the Jerusalem.
Well, I think that unfortunately this probably is the point at which I have to draw this discussion to a close, and I'd like to ask in conclusion for Richard and Mirjam to give their final thoughts. Perhaps Mirjam, you would go first.
Okay, thank you very much, Renata and François. This was really very, very inspiring talk. And even if we wrote after so many years and worked on book for many years, it still encourages new ideas. And I really felt like that this evening brought some new aspects and new thoughts. And thank you very much. So that's from my side.
I'll just say two things very quickly. I think what emerges very interestingly when he comes to Jerusalem is that he leaves behind, to a great extent, some of the confrontational works that he had done in the earlier periods, and that's very striking. The other issue is when François was speaking about Tashlich, it would have been wonderful if we had the time to show it together with Gierymski. Gierymski's portrayal is so moving. It's as if Gierymski really wanted people to understand what these Jews were doing. And yet Hershenberg doesn't want to do that. He is coming from within, and he wants to show, I'm not convinced that it's not confrontational, François, but I think it's clearly a very interesting perspective that he takes this moment of Tashlich and he wants to show his dissatisfaction with what these people are doing. Maybe it's something very much deep within him. Gierymski is a very different portrayal, and it's remarkable to put the two together. And so I'm very appreciative of your comments, Renata and François, and for Antony for bringing us together.
And if I can, thank you very much, Mirjam and Richie. We shared the love for Hirschenberg for so many years, and I know how really tough your work is. This is really something unbelievable, outstanding work, and I would like to thank you in the name of us that for that work. I do hope that the book will be translated into Polish. It should be, absolutely,
Absolutely.
because it's open completely new ideas, I do hope, for Polish art historian, and it's a lot for the history of art in Poland. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. I think that if there's one conclusion that one can draw from tonight's discussion, it is that Hirschenberg is a very considerable painter who really does need to be considered, and I'm very grateful to Mirjam and Richie for making him so much more available. In conclusion, I'd like again to thank those who've done so much to ensure that tonight's broadcast went so smoothly. One can't always be sure that that will be the case, but everything went the way it did. We haven't actually had any questions, but I think that this is a very stimulating discussion which raised a large number of issues. So I'd like to thank Jan Woźniakowski, Tomasz Więzień, Jacek Flux, Magdalena Lasocka, Iveta Rocek, Alexandra Ovcharczyk, Susanna Rosenspindler, and Pavel Rudzki. Without them, we wouldn't have this very smooth discussion, and I'm very grateful that we've all been able to do this. And of course, this discussion will not disappear. It will be on the museum's YouTube panel, and those people who weren't able to hear it this evening will be able to hear it in the future. And finally, in conclusion, I'd like to thank the two discussants, Renata Piątkowska and François Guesnet. They did a wonderful job. They were extremely well prepared. And finally, to thank the two authors, Richie Cohen and Mirjam Rajner. This is a wonderful book. Congratulations again. We're all extremely happy that this book has come out, and we wish it a long and successful future. And thank you all, and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Night. Thank you.
Night.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much.